Looking at my phone screen, I felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach as I read Sarah's text for the third time. Actually, Maya, the cabin only has 3 bedrooms. We need this to be adults-only time. Mum deserves that. The message had arrived 2 weeks ago, but the sting was still fresh. I wasn't invited to my own mother's 65th birthday celebration. My name is Maya Anderson, and I've spent 28 years learning that in my family, I'm reliable enough for the work, but never quite worthy of the joy. As I sat in my small Portland apartment staring at the stack of freelance graphic design projects on my desk, I couldn't shake the feeling that this pattern had been written into my DNA since childhood. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my siblings Sarah and Mark were packing for a 4-day luxury getaway at Lake Tahoe, I was expected to drop everything and babysit their 3 children. Not asked. Expected. The text from my brother Mark yesterday had made that crystal clear. Hey Maya, can you watch Emma, Jake and Lily while we're gone? It's just 4 days. We already told the kids you'll do movie nights with them. No question mark. No, would you mind, or could you possibly? Just the assumption that Maya would handle it like she always did. Like the good little sister who never complained, never said no, never demanded to be treated like an actual family member instead of unpaid help. I closed my laptop and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the rainy Portland street below. The memories came flooding back, each one a small cut that had eventually formed this gaping wound I'd been carrying around for years. I was 10 years old when it started, really started. Sarah was getting married and everyone was bustling around the house in a frenzy of excitement. I remember standing in the doorway of her childhood bedroom, watching Mom help her into the wedding dress, both of them crying happy tears. I was wearing my flower girl dress, a pale pink thing that made me feel like a princess. Maya, honey, Mum had said, barely glancing in my direction. We need you to stay home with Marcus. The sitter cancelled last minute and someone needs to watch your little brother. Marcus was 7, barely 3 years younger than me, but somehow I was responsible enough to care for him while being too young to witness my own sister's wedding. I watched from our living room window as the cars pulled away, my flower girl dress suddenly feeling like a costume for a play I'd never get to perform in. Don't be sad, Maya, Marcus had said, plopping down next to me on the couch. We can watch cartoons. But I wasn't sad, I was angry. Even at 10, I understood that this wasn't normal. Other families didn't leave their children home from important events. Other families didn't treat their daughters like built-in babysitters. I just didn't have the words for it yet. The pattern continued through high school. When Mark turned 18, they threw him a huge party at the country club. I was 16, perfectly capable of attending a family celebration, but someone needed to watch the house while everyone was gone. The excuse was always different, but the result was always the same. Maya stays behind. My high school graduation was probably the most painful example. I'd worked incredibly hard, graduating valedictorian from a competitive school, earning a full scholarship to Portland State. I was proud of myself in a way I'd never been before. For once, this was about me, my achievement. Something they couldn't delegate to someone else or decide I wasn't worthy of. The ceremony was on a Thursday afternoon. I scanned the audience during my valedictorian speech, looking for familiar faces in the crowd. I found them, empty seats where my family should have been. Sarah had a work commitment she couldn't get out of. Mark had finals at his college. Mom and Dad, They'd forgotten entirely until I called that morning to ask what time they'd be there. "Oh, honey," Mum had said, and I could hear her flipping through her calendar. "Is that today?" "Your father and I have that appointment with the financial advisor. We've been trying to get this meeting for months." I gave my speech to a crowd of strangers and teachers talking about family support and community while my own family was nowhere to be found. My best friend, Zoe's parents, took pictures of me afterward, and her mum cried more than my own mother ever had at any of my achievements. That night, I came home to find my family had ordered pizza and were watching a movie together. "How did it go, sweetheart?" Dad asked, not even pausing the TV. "Fine," I said, and went to my room. From that moment, I understood my role in the Anderson family hierarchy. Sarah was the golden child, successful, married, everything my parents bragged about to their friends. Mark was the functional one, reliable, steady, would carry on the family name. And me, I was the help, the backup plan, the one who kept things running smoothly so everyone else could shine. College was supposed to be my escape, but even from a distance, the dynamic persisted. Holiday breaks meant watching Sarah's daughter Emma while she and her husband went on romantic getaways. Summer vacations meant staying home to house sit while everyone else went to the beach. Family events meant Maya handling logistics, Maya coordinating schedules, Maya making sure everyone else could enjoy themselves. I graduated college with honours, started my own freelance business, bought my own apartment. But in my family's eyes, I was still the same 10-year-old girl who could be counted on to stay home and mind the house. Which brings me to last week, sitting in that same apartment, staring at Mark's text message about babysitting his 3 kids during Mom's birthday trip. The trip I wasn't invited to because there wasn't enough room, but somehow there was enough expectation that I'd handle their parental responsibilities while they celebrated without me. I wasn't family enough for the celebration, but reliable enough for the work. The breaking point came when I called Zoe, my best friend since high school. The one person who'd witnessed this family dynamic up close for years. She answered on the first ring, probably sensing from my tone that I was spiraling. "Let me guess," she said before I could even explain. "They want you to babysit while they're at the birthday trip you weren't invited to. How did you know?" "Maya, I've watched your family treat you like unpaid help for 10 years. The only surprise is that it took you this long to call me about it." I found myself pacing around my small living room, phone pressed to my ear, finally saying out loud what I'd been thinking for weeks. "Zoe, I think my family is toxic." There was a pause. "Honey, I've been waiting for you to realise that since we were teenagers." "But they're family. You're supposed to help family." "Family is supposed to include you in celebrations, not just expect you to clean up after them." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Maya, when was the last time they celebrated you? When was the last time they chose to spend time with you when they didn't need something?" I opened my mouth to answer and realised I couldn't. Not a single example came to mind. "You don't owe them free babysitting after they excluded you from your own mother's birthday," Zoe continued. "You've been the family doormat your entire life, and they've gotten so comfortable with it that they don't even see how cruel this is." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed researching family dynamics, toxic relationships, something to help me understand why I felt so hollow every time I tried to please them. I discovered terms I'd never heard before: scapegoat, golden child, emotional labour, parentification. The more I read, the clearer it became. Sarah was the golden child. Everything she did was celebrated, supported, bragged about. Mark was the functional child, reliable and steady, never causing problems but never requiring much attention either. And me? I was the scapegoat. The one who absorbed all the family's dysfunction while simultaneously being expected to hold everything together. I read about adults who'd grown up in families like mine, who'd spent their whole lives trying to earn love through service, never realizing that healthy families don't operate on a transaction basis. Healthy families include their children in celebrations. Healthy families don't assign one child to be the permanent caretaker for everyone else's needs. By 3 a.m, I'd made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I was going to say no. Not just to the babysitting, but to the entire pattern. I was going to stop being available for everyone else's convenience while being excluded from everyone else's joy. If I wasn't family enough for the celebration, I wasn't staff enough for the responsibilities. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in my 28 years of life. I opened my laptop and booked a trip for myself. Not a practical trip, not a business trip, not a trip to help someone else with something. A purely selfish, completely indulgent, ridiculously expensive trip to San Francisco. I'd been saving money for 2 years, originally planning to buy a car, but as I clicked confirm purchase on a boutique hotel reservation in Union Square, I realized this was exactly what that money was meant for. I was going to celebrate my mother's birthday by finally celebrating myself. The hotel was beautiful, the kind of place I'd only ever seen in magazines. Marble bathrooms, city views, a spa that offered treatments I couldn't even pronounce. For 4 days, I was going to live like someone who mattered. Because I was starting to realize that I did matter, even if my family had never figured that out. I spent the rest of the day planning my rebellion. Because that's what this was, a rebellion against 28 years of being taken for granted, of being useful but never valued, of being reliable but never celebrated. I wrote a simple note and taped it to my apartment door. Emergency contact 911. Then I did something that felt more dramatic than anything I'd ever done in my life. I turned off my phone, not silent, not do not disturb, off, completely unreachable. For the first time in my adult life, I was going to be unavailable when my family needed me. They were about to learn what it felt like when the person they'd always counted on simply wasn't there. As I packed my bag Thursday evening, the night before their trip, I felt a mixture of terror and excitement I'd never experienced before. I was about to disappoint people, about to let them down, about to force them to deal with their own problems. And for the first time in my life, that felt exactly right. I had no idea that by the time I returned from San Francisco, everything would be different. Not just in my family, but in me. I was about to learn that sometimes the only way to be seen is to step away from being used. But that revelation was still a day away. For now, I was just Maya Anderson, sitting in my apartment on a Thursday night, about to commit the first truly selfish act of her entire life. And I'd never been more excited about anything. Friday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made San Francisco feel magical. I was sitting at a rooftop bar overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, a glass of wine in my hand and my phone still completely powered off in my purse. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely peaceful. No one could reach me, no one could ask me for anything, and most importantly, no one could make me feel guilty for existing. I had no idea that 300 miles north, chaos was unfolding at my apartment door. Sarah's BMW pulled up to my building at exactly 6 p.m. just as I was ordering my second glass of wine and watching the sunset paint the bridge in shades of gold. She stepped out of the driver's seat, looking frazzled, her perfectly styled blonde hair already showing signs of stress. Mark climbed out of the passenger side, immediately going to wrestle 3 car seats and an army of overnight bags from the back. 7-year-old Emma bounded toward my building's entrance with the excitement of a child who'd been promised movie nights and ice cream. 5-year-old Jake dragged his stuffed dinosaur behind him, already asking when Aunt Maya would make his favourite mac and cheese. 3-year-old Lily clung to her blanket, tired from the drive and ready for the comfort routine that Maya always provided. Sarah pressed the buzzer to my apartment. No response. She pressed it again, holding it longer this time. Still nothing. Maybe she's in the bathroom, Mark suggested, though something in his voice suggested he was already sensing that this wasn't going to go according to plan. Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed my number. The call went straight to a generic voicemail message that didn't even mention my name. Her perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her iPhone as she tried again. Same result. "This is weird," she muttered, pressing the buzzer again. "Maya always answers. She's the most reliable person I know." That was the problem, of course. I had been reliable. Predictably, automatically, unquestionably reliable. For 28 years, I had been the person who always answered, always showed up, always said yes. The idea that I might not be available hadn't even occurred to them as a possibility. Mark was starting to look genuinely worried now. "Sarah, we need to be at the cabin by 9. The drive to Tahoe is 3 hours, and Mum's expecting us for her birthday dinner tomorrow." "I know that," Sarah snapped, her stress levels rising as Emma started asking why they weren't going inside yet. "Maya's probably just, I don't know, maybe she's at the store. She'll be back soon." But as minutes turned into an hour and an hour turned into panic, it became clear that I wasn't coming back soon. I wasn't coming back at all. Meanwhile, I was experiencing the most liberating evening of my adult life. I'd moved from the rooftop bar to a small Italian restaurant in North Beach, where I was thoroughly enjoying a meal I'd ordered without considering anyone else's preferences or dietary restrictions. No kids' menus, no negotiating between chicken nuggets and pizza, no cutting up anyone's food while my own got cold. Just me, a plate of ossobuco, and the novel I'd been trying to finish for 3 months. Back in Portland, the situation was escalating. Sarah had called their parents, who were already at Waggy, the cabin, with Mark's wife, Jennifer, trying to explain why they were running late. The kids were getting hungry and cranky, and Jake had started crying because he wanted Aunt Maya to read him his bedtime story. "Maybe there's an emergency," Jennifer suggested over speakerphone, trying to be helpful. "Have you tried calling hospitals?" "Maya doesn't have emergencies," Sarah said, with the confidence of someone who'd never considered that her sister might have a life outside of family obligations. "She's the most boring person alive. Her biggest emergency is running out of coffee." It was Mark who first suggested checking my social media. Sarah had never followed me on Instagram. Why would she need to keep track of someone who was always available anyway? But she created an account just to search for me. What she found made her blood run cold. There I was, posting a photo from Pier 39 at sunset, smiling genuinely for what looked like the first time in years. The caption read, "Finally taking the family vacation I deserve. San Francisco, self-care, worth it." She's in San Francisco, Sarah whispered, staring at her phone in disbelief. Maya is in San Francisco. Mark leaned over to look at the screen. That's impossible. She's supposed to be watching the kids. Well, she's clearly not watching the kids. Sarah's voice was rising to a pitch that was making Lily start to whimper. She's drinking wine and taking vacation photos while we're standing here with 3 children. The post had been up for 2 hours and already had over 50 likes and a dozen comments. Sarah scrolled through them, her horror growing with each response. Good for you, Maya. You deserve all the happiness. From someone named Jessica. It's about time you put yourself first. From her college roommate. Living your best life. So proud of you for taking this trip. From our cousin Jenny. The comments painted a picture that Sarah had never considered. That people outside the family had been watching this dynamic for years, and they were celebrating my decision to break free from it. But the comment that really stopped her cold came from our Aunt Linda, Mum's sister. Honey, I'm so glad you're celebrating yourself. Every daughter deserves to be included in her mother's birthday, not left behind to work. Enjoy every minute of this trip. Sarah stared at the phone, the implication hitting her like a physical blow. Aunt Linda knew. She knew that Maya had been excluded from the birthday trip, and she was publicly supporting my decision to go somewhere else instead. Oh, God, Sarah whispered. People know. Mark was trying to comfort Jake, who was now full-on sobbing because he wanted to go home but also wanted Aunt Maya, while Emma was pressing all the buttons on my building's intercom system, hoping one of them would magically make me appear. We need to find childcare, Mark said, his voice tight with the stress of impending crisis. Jennifer's already at the cabin with her parents. My mum is expecting us. We can't just not show up to her 65th birthday. Sarah was frantically scrolling through her contacts, calling everyone she could think of who might be available for emergency babysitting on a Friday night. Her regular sitter was out of town. Mark's backup sitter was at a wedding. Every childcare service in the city was either booked or didn't do overnight care for 3 children. As the reality of the situation sank in, Sarah did something she'd never done before in her 32 years of life. She started to panic about the consequences of her own choices. This is insane, she kept repeating. Maya doesn't do things like this. Maya doesn't just disappear. Maya is responsible. But I wasn't being irresponsible. For the first time in my life, I was being responsible to myself. At that exact moment, I was checking into my hotel room, marvelling at the marble bathroom and the view of Union Square. I'd already booked a spa appointment for tomorrow morning and had dinner reservations at a restaurant I'd been wanting to try for years. My phone remained off, tucked away in my suitcase like a relic from my old life. I had no idea that my absence was causing a domino effect of chaos that would ultimately force my family to confront how they'd been treating me for decades. By Saturday morning, the situation had gone from bad to nuclear. Sarah and Mark had been forced to cancel their trip entirely. They'd spent Friday night tag-teaming childcare in Mark's apartment, taking turns trying to calm 3 confused and disappointed children who couldn't understand why their promised sleepover with Aunt Maya had turned into an impromptu nightmare. Sarah had missed her mother's 65th birthday celebration, the birthday she'd specifically excluded me from to make it adults only and special for Mum. Instead of being at Lake Tahoe toasting with champagne, she was dealing with a toddler's meltdown and a kindergartner's questions about why Aunt Maya didn't want to see them anymore. Mark had been forced to call in sick to work on Monday, burning vacation days he'd been saving for Christmas. Because they still hadn't found alternative childcare and their original plan had been completely derailed. But the real crisis came when Mom called, furious that her birthday weekend had been ruined by what she saw as Maya's selfish and inexplicable behaviour. "I don't understand," Mom kept saying over and over. "Maya has never done anything like this. Maya is the reliable one. Maya always helps family." It was Aunt Linda who finally said what everyone else had been thinking, but no one had been brave enough to voice. "Margaret," she said during the family conference call that happened Sunday morning while I was enjoying a leisurely brunch in Sausalito. "When exactly was Maya invited to your birthday celebration?" The silence on the call was deafening. Well, the cabin was small and we thought," Mom began. "So she wasn't invited." "It's not that she wasn't invited," Sarah jumped in, her voice defensive. "It's just that there wasn't room for everyone, and we needed someone reliable to babysit," Aunt Linda finished. "So you excluded Maya from her mother's 65th birthday party, but expected her to provide free childcare so the rest of you could attend." The words hung in the air like an accusation, which is exactly what they were. "When you put it like that, it sounds terrible," Mum said weakly. "It sounds terrible because it is terrible," Aunt Linda replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been watching this dynamic from the outside for years. "You've been treating that girl like hired help since she was 10 years old. The only surprise is that it took her this long to stand up for herself." That's when the real reckoning began. I finally turned my phone back on Monday evening after spending 4 days in complete digital detox. I'd hiked in Muir Woods, visited Alcatraz, eaten incredible food, and had conversations with strangers who treated me like a person worth knowing. I felt like I'd been holding my breath for 28 years and had finally been allowed to exhale. The moment my phone powered up, it exploded with notifications. 17 missed calls from Sarah, 23 missed calls from Mark, 8 missed calls from Mom, 47 text messages ranging from concerned to confused to absolutely furious. I scrolled through them chronologically, watching the narrative unfold like a dramatic performance I'd missed while living my own life for the first time. Friday night, Sarah. "Maya, where are you? We're at your apartment with the kids." Saturday morning, Mark. "Maya, this isn't funny anymore. Call us back immediately." Saturday evening, Mom. "Maya, Elizabeth Anderson, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you've ruined my birthday and hurt 3 innocent children. Call me right now." Sunday afternoon, Sarah. "I can't believe you would be this selfish. Do you have any idea what you've done to our family?" But then, mixed in with the anger and demands, there were other messages. Aunt Linda had texted, "Proud of you for finally putting yourself first, honey. It's about time." My cousin Jenny had written, "Saw your SF posts. Good for you. They've taken advantage of your kindness for way too long." Even some family friends had reached out after seeing the social media fallout, offering support and sharing their own stories of feeling excluded or taken for granted by family members. I sat in my hotel room Monday evening, looking out at the twinkling lights of the city, and realised that I had inadvertently started a conversation that was long overdue. By refusing to be available, I had forced everyone to see how much they'd been depending on my availability. By choosing myself, for once, I had highlighted how rarely anyone else had chosen me. I called Sarah back first. "Maya, she answered on the first ring, her voice a mixture of relief and fury. "Where the hell have you been? Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've been in San Francisco," I said calmly, "having a wonderful time. How was Mum's birthday?" "How was—" Sarah sputtered. "Maya, we couldn't go. We were stuck with the kids because you disappeared without telling anyone." "I didn't disappear," I corrected. "I went on vacation. You know, that thing you all did for Mum's birthday, except I actually went. You were supposed to babysit." "I was supposed to be invited to my own mother's birthday celebration," I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "But apparently there wasn't room for me at the adults-only celebration, so I created my own celebration." The silence stretched between us, and I could practically hear Sarah's brain trying to process the logic of what I'd said. "Maya, we're family," she finally said, falling back on the argument that had worked for decades. "Family helps family." "You're right," I agreed. "Family does help family. Family also includes family in important moments. Family doesn't exclude one person from celebrations and then expect that same person to handle all the work." But the kids were so confused and upset. Emma cried for 2 hours because she didn't understand why you weren't there. For the first time, I felt a pang of guilt, not because I'd made the wrong choice, but because Emma, Jake, and Lily had been hurt by a situation they didn't understand. They were innocent victims of a family dynamic that had nothing to do with them. "I'm sorry the children were upset," I said genuinely. "But Sarah, do you understand why I wasn't there?" Another pause. Then, in a much quieter voice, We've always been able to count on you. To do the work, yes, but never to share the joy. That's not how we see it." "But that's how it is," I said, and for the first time in our relationship, I wasn't trying to make her feel better about something that hurt me. "Sarah, when was the last time you invited me to something fun? When was the last time you called me just to talk, not because you needed something?" The silence stretched so long I thought the caller dropped. She started, then stopped. I love Emma, Jake, and Lily," I continued. "I love being their aunt, but I'm not going to be their unpaid babysitter anymore while being excluded from family events. If I'm not family enough for the celebrations, I'm not staff enough for the responsibilities." When I hung up with Sarah, I felt something I'd never experienced after a confrontation with my family. Peace instead of guilt. The conversation with Mark was shorter, but somehow more honest. He'd always been the most straightforward of my siblings, and when I explained my position, he was quiet for a long time. "Maya," he finally said, "I never thought about it that way." "I know," I replied. "That's part of the problem. You've always been so good at helping, so reliable. I guess we started taking it for granted." "You started taking me for granted." "Yeah," he admitted, "we did." It wasn't an apology, exactly, but it was acknowledgement. For Mark, that was progress. The call with Mum was the hardest. She cried, which made me want to cave immediately and apologise for everything. But I'd spent 4 days remembering what it felt like to matter, and I wasn't ready to give that up. "I just don't understand, Maya," she said through her tears. "We've always been a close family." "Mum, I wasn't invited to your 65th birthday party." "It wasn't that you weren't invited. What would you call it then?" She was quiet for a moment. "There just wasn't space. There was space for everyone except me. And then when you needed childcare, suddenly there was an expectation that I'd be available." "You you've always been so good with the children. I'm good with children because I've been raising them since I was 10 years old, I said, the words coming out sharper than I'd intended. Mum, do you remember my high school graduation? Of course I remember your graduation. Do you remember being there? The silence told me everything I needed to know. We wanted to be there, she said weakly. But there was that appointment with the financial advisor. There was always something more important than me, I said, and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of that truth. Always someone else's needs that came before mine. Always someone else's celebration that mattered more. That's not true, Maya. Mom, name one time, just one time, when my needs came first in this family. I waited and waited and waited. She couldn't. That's when I knew that my decision to step away hadn't been selfish or cruel or dramatic. It had been necessary. It had been the only way to force them to see what they'd been doing to me for my entire life. The conversation with Mom ended with her promising to think about everything, and me promising to consider coming to Sunday dinner next week. But for the first time, that promise came with conditions. I'll come to Sunday dinner, I said, if I'm invited as your daughter, not as the person who cleans up afterward. As I packed my bags Tuesday morning, preparing to return to Portland, I realised that something fundamental had shifted. Not just in my family dynamics, but in me. I'd learned that I could survive disappointing people. I'd learned that I could choose myself without the world ending. I'd learned that being reliable to others meant nothing if I wasn't reliable to myself. The flight home was turbulent, but I felt steady for the first time in years. I didn't know what would happen next with my family, but I knew what wouldn't happen. I wouldn't go back to being invisible. I wouldn't go back to being taken for granted. I wouldn't go back to being family enough for the work, but not worthy of the celebration. I had finally learned the difference between being needed and being valued. And I was never going to forget it again. When I walked into my apartment that Tuesday evening, there was a handwritten note taped to my door. Not the emergency contact information I'd left. That had apparently been torn down in fury, but something new. It was from Emma, Sarah's 7-year-old daughter, written in careful first-grade handwriting. Dear Aunt Maya, I hope you had fun on your trip. I missed you, but Mommy said you needed to do something important for yourself. Can we have movie night soon? Love, Emma. As I held that note, I realised that my rebellion had accomplished something I'd never expected. It had started teaching the next generation that adults are allowed to have needs too, that family members deserve to be included, that love isn't measured by how much work you're willing to do for free. Emma would grow up knowing that Aunt Maya went on trips and had adventures and put herself first sometimes. She would grow up understanding that being family meant celebration and inclusion, not just obligation and expectation. And maybe, just maybe, she would never have to disappear for 4 days just to remember that she mattered. That thought made everything, the confrontations, the guilt, the chaos I'd caused, completely worth it. I was finally home, not just to my apartment, but to myself.